My friends, I'd like to tell you about something that happened a couple weeks ago, something that changed much of what I feel when I think about Mary and the birth of Jesus Christ. I was in the friar on a particularly cold and windy night when the doorbell rang. When I went to answer the door, I found a well-dressed man all bundled up in a coat and scarf against the frigid night. But he was very upset and having difficulty breathing, and I tried to bring him inside, afraid that he might be having heart trouble. But he brushed aside my concern and breathlessly said that I needed to come with him right away, like he was out of breath because he had run 4 blocks to the friary to get help. He said he found a young woman with a new baby living in a car parked on a side street 4 blocks from the friary. The baby was only 8 months old. The man said the baby's mother was watching over him with all the power of her motherhood. So I immediately left the house with him. When we arrived, we found that people had begun to gather around the car looking inside. When I managed to get the young mother to open the door, I introduced myself and asked her if she would like to come to the friary to warm up and have some food for herself and the baby. At first, she was reluctant to leave the car filled with their possessions, but realizing the needs of the baby must come first, she finally agreed and followed me back to the friary with the baby cradled in her arms. Shortly after we got to the friary, her husband arrived, and once they were fed and warm, we spoke about their lives and about how they found themselves in a car parked on a side street on a bitter, cold night in New York City. The husband, Joe, his wife, Sarah, and their new baby boy, Christopher, had lived in an apartment in New Jersey when Joe, through no fault of his own, lost his job as a maintenance supervisor in the building they lived in. Because the apartment was part of Joe's employment arrangement, when he lost his job, the family also lost their home. They had really tried to make ends meet, but they were quickly evicted and were left with their one last possession, the old car they now lived in. Sarah was certainly a strong woman, and she was fiercely protective of her baby boy. Even though I could tell she was weak from having not eaten in a while, she would only have something to eat after Christopher had eaten. She was his mother, and he came first in her life, no matter what. After we found immediate emergency housing for the young family, I went into the friar's chapel just to sit quietly and reflect on what I had experienced. It had been very disturbing and yet a very holy night. It was as if I myself had been thrust right into the Christmas story. I began making connections between that night and the birth of Christ over 2,000 years ago. Mary and Joseph and Jesus seemed to me very much like Sarah, Joe, and Christopher. A young couple with a newborn baby and so few possessions that all they had could fit in a car. People gathering around the car like shepherds gathering around the stable. The dome light of the car like the Star of Bethlehem, providing light and visibility. And the young couple driven out of their home into a new place, like Mary and Joseph leaving Nazareth and going to Bethlehem. But the heart of this young mother, Sarah, struck me more than anything else. Her strength and love for her baby reminded me of Mary and how she protected Jesus and loved him so fully with all her energy. Just like Mary, Sarah felt the pain of poverty harming her son, and she too protected him as best she could. Christmas is the joy of new birth. It's also the pain of suffering and the agony of death, all wrapped into one great feast. There is always the shadow of the cross over the manger of Christ's birth. After reflecting in the chapel and considering this whole holy night, I can tell you there are many nativities. There are many Joes, Sarahs, and baby Christophers who are really struggling in our society today. Many young couples with children being driven into the dark night because of lost jobs and overpriced housing. Young mothers struggling to hold families together and trying desperately to care for their children through poverty, homelessness, and violence. The Franciscan friars know these people. My friends, we know their names, we know their stories, and we know their desperation. We meet them every day, and we help them constantly. However, we cannot continue our work without your help. We urgently need your prayers, your care, and your financial support for us to continue to help those who come to us be safe, warm, sheltered, and fed this winter. As you celebrate this Christmas with wonderful food and family and friends, please remember all the Sarahs, Joes, and Christophers in our world who have no one to help them. Help us help them move from a cold car to a warm place where the star isn't a dome light, but the light that comes from loving one another. From all of us to you, Merry Christmas.